Good morning. It is Monday morning. If you're watching this live, great. If you're watching live, hit that like button. Appreciate it very much. If you are watching after the fact, hit the like button. Subscribe to the channel. And if you're listening to this on the podcast feed, thank you. How about an Apple podcast review? 5 stars. Leave a question in your review. That'll get into the mailbag. We'll be getting back to the mailbag soon. All right, a few pieces of news to get to from the weekend, NFL Combine weekend, and some of them are conflicting as it relates to Brandon Aiyuk, or are they? Ian Rappaport on Sunday said the Niners still firmly believe that Brandon Aiyuk is in their plans. Quote, I expect them to work on a deal for him probably after free agency. So that's what Rap Sheet said on Sunday on NFL Network. ESPN.com, Dan Graziano and Jeremy Fowler wrote a big piece on news and notes from the weekend. And this is what Dan Graziano wrote. The Niners would like to get Aiyuk's contract extended, but he's also a trade candidate if they can't get something done. He wrote, Amon-Ra St. Brown's been working on an extension that some think could land in the $26 to $28 million per year range. And the Dolphins and Eagles have decisions on Jalen Waddle, Devontae Smith, both of whom are extension eligible for the first time and already have big money receiver teammates Tyreek Hill and A.J. Brown. I mean, Devontae Smith is not going anywhere. And I would think that Jalen Waddle's not going anywhere too. But anyway, those were, I guess you could call them conflicting reports, although I actually don't think, I think there's some similarities here. Let's go back. Rap Sheet says after free agency, the Niners will be willing to talk extension. And Graziano writes, the Niners would like to get something done, but he's also a trade candidate if they can't get something done. So both of those things to me feel like the reporters saying the 49ers have other higher priorities than Brandon Aiyuk. And it's not because, figuring out whether they're going to sign Graham Glasgow is a higher priority than Brandon Aiyuk. It's because he doesn't have to be a higher priority than free agency because he's got a $14 million contract for this season. And so when Rap Sheet says they'll work on a deal for him after free agency, he's saying, let's see how free agency goes. The Niners are not going to necessarily let what he has or doesn't have, and right now what he's got is $14 million, dictate what they're going to do in free agency. And what Graziano is saying is they'd like to get it done, but he's also a trade candidate if they can't get something done. In other words, we're going to deal with free agency first and foremost. Then we're going to find out how much you want. Then we'll decide whether or not we're going to trade you. But I think what the in both of these things, to me, what I take away is not necessarily that these two guys' reports are opposed of one another. To me, they both have the same tone, which is the Niners know that they are not in an urgent situation with him, even if it feels, I think a lot of times in these situations, it probably feels more urgent to the player, to the agent. Maybe it feels more urgent to us. This is part of why, as we go back, or if you've missed it, my prediction on this has been that he plays on the 14-year, 5th-year option, and that an extension comes for him next year. My logic on that has been that the main counterpoint to that is why wait to sign him to an extension when you're also going to be potentially paying your quarterback and it gets really expensive. But my logic is that if you can stomach the $14 million this year and still build a team around him, or with free agents this year, then you can further delay the years in which his contract will get big. You sign him this year, you take less on the cap this year, but now 3 years from now, maybe in the second year of Brock Purdy's deal, right? Now his number is jumping up, or next year, maybe his number is jumping up in the first year of a Purdy deal. So I just think if you're able to wait, you can stagger even more with some of these other contracts you have and are going to have, and get you into parts of other people's contracts where you can get out of them. Even Debo's next year after June 1st is only, whether you trade him or cut him, it's only a $6 million hit. So I'm not saying that's what's going to happen, but to me, I just see the logic for them in waiting and kind of further staggering the big money on his deal, and less so, and less so the the deal this year. Sorry, I got distracted by a comment for a second. I should turn those off for a split second. I saw a question in there. So that's the deal with Aiyuk. So neither one of these things changes for me, kind of what my prediction is. They are operating with patience. That to me is what I read out of those two comments. And then the other thing, if you watch the receivers this weekend in the combine or just kind of, read up about it or followed it a little bit, the second and third rounds are going to be a wide receiver bonanza. 9 wide receivers ran faster than a 4.4 40. 23 receivers ran 4.5 or under, including Rome Odunze at 6'3", 212 pounds, who did not hurt his stock in any sense. I saw Peter, I was watching Good Morning Football today. Peter Schrager said that he could be the number one receiver off the board, that there are people around the league that think that would not be surprised if Rome Odunze went number one. He did the 3-cone drill over and over and over again. The fans were gone. The other players were gone. Most of the team personnel were gone, but he was going to stand there and stick it out. And I got to tell you, my default position on that type of action is to be a skeptic. Like normally, what I've said for a long time is that it should be easy to fake it. Like, let's say you're a quarterback and you're doing a lot of interviews. People are like, oh, this guy's impressive. Like, yeah, there is so much out there that you could mimic. I think coaches are like this too. A lot of younger, they're mimicking other coaches. They're just mimicking. Like, oh, this guy's smooth with the media. Yeah, he's mimicking somebody else he saw. So you're always trying to dig through and figure out, is this authentically this person? Is this a performance? Right. And you definitely have to view anything that you do, that anybody does at the combine through that lens. Like, is this an act? I will say, I don't know if it's healthy or not. That's just my default, is to go, yeah, this is an act. With Rome, I think it's legit. I'm gonna a little bit let go of my skepticism. I think he really wanted to nail that 3-cone. He spent all this time preparing. He spent all this time trying to nail it. Here's the biggest moment. I'm standing right here. This is what I've been getting. All these guys, this is what they've been spending all of their time getting ready for this combine. So I'm choosing not to be a skeptic on Rome Odunze doing the 3-cone over and over and over again. Because this he's a top 10 pick. And everything I've heard about him, I think he might be the best receiver in this group when it's all said and done. Anyway, but there are some mock drafts, back to Aiyuk and the Niners. There are some mock drafts that have as many as 7 receivers going in the first round. Was not a great week. If you look at some of those, not all, but some had Keon Coleman in the middle of the first round, had Troy Franklin maybe at the end of the first round. Both those guys hurt themselves a little bit this weekend. Franklin did not run well. Keon Coleman did not test great. So the second and third rounds are going to be stuffed with receivers. And the 49ers have a second-round pick at 63 and 2 picks at the end of the third round, 94, and then their compensatory pick at 99. So if Brandon Aiyuk is still on the team on the Friday of the draft, there's going to be plenty of, what about this guy? What about that guy? Hell, there might be a guy that falls to the Niners. Let's say it not falls. Let's just say there's a receiver there at 63, very high on their board. Maybe they've taken an offensive lineman early. Maybe at 94 in the third round, there's a receiver that people like. Although I think a lot of these guys are going to go before 94. They might have the best player on their board is just a receiver, and they might take it. And if that happens, there's going to be a lot of, what do? You got Jennings, you got Aiyuk, you got Debo. What's happening here? Is this a signal that Ayuk's about to go? And I don't know. We don't know the answer to that. But I think my point is just this thing is going to be stuffed. I saw a lot of guys tested so well, but a lot of them were in kind of a little clump together. That's an indication that when receivers, I think you're going to have your first 3 guys go, right? It's in some order: Neighbors, Rome Odunze, Marvin Harrison Jr. But then when the other guys start going, it could really be a waterfall of receivers. So I don't know, if the Niners draft high enough to be a part of that in the second round, but if they do, then it will only further amplify any questions about, what comes next for Brandon Aiyuk. Then there was also this piece of news This was from the ESPN.com article. This was Graziano and Jeremy Fowler both wrote a bunch of stuff, and this was about Zach Wilson. Rams and Niners are among intriguing options for Zach Wilson, who has permission to seek a trade from the Jets. Wilson is looking for a skilled offensive head coach at a place to revive his career. Sean McVay and Kyle Shanahan both need backup quarterback help at the moment. Okay, these things are not written just pulling things out of thin air. And it makes some sense. I mean, the Niners would have obviously done a ton of work preparing for the draft on Zach Wilson. You know, is this Sam Darnold 2.0 for the Niners is partly the question. We've seen the Rams go to formerly highly drafted quarterbacks when they went to Baker Mayfield a couple of years ago. Zach Wilson's probably a good fit with Matthew Stafford because Zach Wilson needs the red shirt. He thought he was getting a red shirt year. In a weird way, he's just looking. All he wants is a red shirt year. It sounds like he's not looking necessarily to go play right now. He wants to go learn, wants to go study abroad with a good offensive head coach and just kind of settle in. It'd be great for him to not be in the news for a while. Very Brandon Staley-esque. It'd be great for him to not be in the news, not talk to the media, not play in any games, and just kind of be behind the scenes and, have Brock Purdy and Kyle Shanahan or Matthew Stafford and Sean McVay at the end of the year say, yeah, he was a model teammate, and then I think part of the reason you target, let's say if you're Zach and his agent, a place like the Niners or the Rams is because they produce assistant coaches to head coaches a lot. So you want to go to a place where you think, let me go just chill, learn. And then in a year or two, but in a year, maybe Brian Griese becomes an NFL head coach. And he's like, you know what? That Zach Wilson guy wasn't all that bad. And he's going to be my hand-picked kind of little project to become an NFL starter again. So, to me, this is real. And it sounds like, as a guy that's made a lot of money, he's willing to be behind the scenes a little bit. Now, the problem is that, let's go look at what I should have looked at this before I started this conversation. But Zach Wilson's contract, and the other thing is like, is Denver going to like him? Is Sean Payton? I know that was a report that was out there. His cap hit this year is $11 million, which you would think would eliminate him from the 49ers. I don't know that, the Rams would be all that interested in him, but it's an intriguing prospect. It's the biggest problem with him. And I do think the Niners would be involved. I think he's different than like getting a free agent, undrafted rookie type or seventh round guy. There's just not a lot of evidence that he's the Niners type. But they would know from Mike LaFleur. They would know from Robert Saleh, what kind of if he's a guy worth being around. To me, the time for the Niners to quote unquote get Zach Wilson would be after this coming stop. This the Sam Darnold, when you can sign him cheap. Right now, you can't sign him cheap, but just always be aware of quarterbacks that intrigue Kyle Shanahan that struggle somewhere else. Just always be aware of those guys. Whether they be backups or starters. But I talked about the other day bringing some guy in, drafting him in the sixth round, fifth round, and having him make more than Brock Purdy. Having Zach Wilson come in and make 11 times more than Brock Purdy. Although somebody left a comment on a video the other day that said that Brock was his local Toyota endorsement had become a national Toyota endorsement, which now we're talking big dog money. But sure, go to the Rams. I think this guy in Denver would be fascinating with Sean Payton. I don't know if that'd be a great fit for him, right? But him and Sean could bond over the Jets offense, over their feelings on the Jets OC Nathaniel Hackett. Two of them could do a podcast on that topic. So I don't know. I do find the Zach Wilson story interesting because it feels like it started off on the wrong foot and then just kept going wrong foot. But, remember one of the stories a few weeks ago was his whole thing was he was promised that him and Rodgers were going to be boys, and then Aaron gets hurt and he barely hears from Aaron. So just bizarre. Some other free agency notes from the Graziano and Jeremy Fowler piece. The Niners have some interest in bringing back Chase Young. who was a bit of a disappointment after their deadline deal, but he's still just 24. I mean, he'll be 25 and be 25 the day before your taxes are due, April 14th. So he's 25 years old, but he's got a good relationship with Nick Bosa. He might end up having to take a 1-year prove-it deal, be it from the Niners or someone else. There's still enough teams intrigued by his potential. Fine. A 1-year prove-it deal, meaning cheap, great. But he had a prove-it year with the Niners, or a half year, or a couple of months with the Niners. And until the Super Bowl, it didn't feel like he proved it. And then in the Super Bowl, he was fantastic. Now, maybe he got worn down, and maybe the 2 weeks off were great. Maybe the motivation of having everybody talk shit about him after that clip of him was like the centerpiece of a whole conversation about whether or not he plays hard. As we went on with that thing, the clip was damning. But then I thought as we went on and on and on, it became, and I said this at the time, like a little bit of a pile-on, a little much. Like, yeah, that was bad. But you telling me we can't find clips of big guys jogging ever? I get it. Big game, big moment. But, let's not act like Chase Young is just some outlier of a guy who takes a playoff here or there. You want to hunt film and find a guy taking I'm not Chase Young apologizing here, but I'm just saying I thought it went way too far the other way. That if you told me he's back on a team-friendly deal, here's where good coaches matter. What does Chris Kasarik say? Does Chris Kasarik say, yeah, there is more juice in that orange that I can squeeze out. Give me a training camp, give me a whole year, and we're going to make something here, or not? I mean, remember, we're talking about a former blue chip, as blue chip a prospect as it gets, who was available for, not nothing, but not a lot. And understandably, at the time near the deadline when you're available, half the league is not going to be interested because they're not a playoff team. And it made a lot of sense for the Niners, given the Nick Bosa connection and given the need. But, I would be open to this. I don't have the film of him jogging, replaying in my mind and overloading it. But, I mean, understand, you would just view it the way you view most of some of the Chris Kasarik little projects. And I think you could argue that given that he came into the team mid-year, maybe a preseason with the 49ers and a full season with the 49ers, you'd get a little bit more production from him. I don't think that's an unreasonable thing. They also wrote Graham Glasgow, guard-needy teams that don't want to spend top dollar will still allot quality money to the next tier. Glasgow started 15 games for Detroit, held his own. He can play 3 offensive line positions. Okay. I mean, he graded out 8th amongst guards, PFF. I've seen him connected to the Niners a few times. But his, where they really need, obviously you have to run the football with them. But pass blocking on the interior is critical. He ranked 52nd in PFF among pass blocking guards. John Feliciano graded out better than he did against the pass. But the problem with Feliciano, he played half as many snaps. Feliciano actually graded out as a higher ranked guard overall. He was 5th among the available guards last year. But again, half as many snaps. But he's a guy I'd like to see him bring back. Glasgow shouldn't be that expensive. And then the other thing they wrote was Blake Cashman, Azeez Al-Shire. The Cashman part's not relevant here, but Azeez Al-Shire, 2 do-it-all linebackers for Houston and Tennessee, respectively, have caught teams' attention. So if you think that the 49ers are going to get, Azeez Al-Shire on some little discount, like they're the only ones that know about Azeez Al-Shire, they're not the only ones that know about Azeez Al-Shire. But PFF projected him an $11.5 million guaranteed contract, 3 years, $6.75 million. He'll turn 27 years old this year. So, they had to choose between him and Dre Greenlaw because they're both kind of on similar tracks here. I know there's been some talk in the last week or so because Dre Greenlaw's doctor said everything went well and recovery time looks pretty good about how soon Dre Greenlaw could be back. I think if you're treating this year just like you treated last year, which is a year to go win the Super Bowl, you need some high-level Dre Greenlaw insurance. I don't think you can bank on Greenlaw being an incredibly fast healer. They didn't bank on. Remember, the Niners, and maybe this was more complicated than this, But the Niners didn't bank on Brock Purdy being a fast healer last year. When free agency rolled around, what'd they do? They signed Sam Darnold. And it was not an indictment of Brock. It was not to be their starter. It was partly just, I think, circumstances were good because Kyle Shanahan liked the guy, might have drafted the guy if they hadn't traded for Jimmy Garoppolo once upon a time, might have just drafted him. So there was a lot of reason there for Sam Darnold to be drafted. But just understand what the Niners did last year with a key player coming off of an injury. And remember, Brock had a very optimistic return to play timeline. As it turned out, he nailed it. He hit the targets. Everything was fine. Hindsight 2020, it was all good. There was nothing to worry about. But you don't know that at the time. And they were able, and I wonder if the Niners would say this, part of the reason everything went so smoothly with Purdy, they were able to not rush because they had Darnold there. Oh, and Trey Lance. But because they had Darnold there. That was light sarcasm from me. But because they had Darnold there, they were not in a position to have to really push Brock. They could be patient. And as he hit every checkpoint, they could continue to be patient. You would like to be able to do that with Greenlaw, right? If you can afford it to say, we've got Azeez Al-Shire. We don't have to be – this is a guy who didn't just pop an Achilles. He popped an Achilles after dealing with Achilles tendonitis. You want, because of his age, you're not just thinking like one more year of Dre Greenlaw. You're thinking get him back. Eventually he's 100%. Maybe it's not this year, but in 2 years, it's definitely the case. And he's a key part of your team. So, I think part of what signing another linebacker does is it lets you not push the issue with Greenlaw and risk that he comes back too soon or risk further injury. And, and then if you're able to afford it all and you look back and he checks all those boxes. I mean, look around this year. He gets hurt even when he's healthy. You need another linebacker. Are the guys you drafted, D. Winters and Jalen Graham, about to step up and take that mantle? Doesn't feel like they're next up. I mean, they're worth investing in, but doesn't feel like they're next up, ready to Oren Burks. But those two young guys ready to, really fill the gap if Dre Greenlaw's got to miss extended time. So anyway, just interesting to see. Now, the projection on that number was $11.5 million guaranteed. These are players that other teams will be interested as well. So I guess it's the first weekday we've talked since the Niners hired Nick Sorensen. I did a Saturday morning. Deal, and I still feel good about that. So I don't. Yeah, I did a little IG poll, I think it was, and most people were optimistic. We're feeling good, and I am too. I mean, I think it's fine for them. I think I was probably incorrect on exactly what Zach Wilson would cost the Niners. So I got to update that. I was trying to look at it right now. He would probably be cheaper on that trade, maybe half the money, $5 million, 5.4 still feels like a lot, but don't go quoting me on what that number would cost the 49ers. Got to get that right. I am intrigued by him for them, but maybe not right now. But thank you for a few people in the comments pointing that out. Bowler Dan says, sign Cam Newton. He still has some fight left in him. All right, so there's some of the news, some of the buzz. And let's get to some of your comments now. Let me make a note and then dive into some of what y'all think. Kid Icarus, how are those down sheets treating you? I mean, it was awful. Hotel room. Down. Michael, yes, Purdy rushed the healing process. You could just see in his soft throws. I saw all the throws he made in training camp, and I didn't feel like a guy rushed. Now, remember, they had those, it felt like, they said these off days were planned, but now we're being safe with them because maybe there's a little arm soreness. I had a former NFL quarterback tell me during the year they thought that his arm would be stronger this year, 2024, than it was in 2023. But, that's a pretty different surgery. He didn't get the Tommy John. And so there's not a lot of history on how guys recover from it. But he's definitely going in the lookbook when they present that surgery to people. That this guy did excellent with it. TC says, I'm all in on Zach for sure. I mean, he's super talented. But when he made one play last year against, was it the Raiders? That rolling left throw all the way to the end zone. But it doesn't feel like the time to me. Pete says Niners have a lot of needs, but if Penix is available in the first round, he'd be hard to pass on. I don't think he'd be hard to pass on for the Niners because starting quarterback is not one of their needs. And you're drafting Michael Penix to be one of your starting quarterbacks. It's not anywhere near. It's at the bottom of their needs list. But that said, Pete, I'm glad you brought up Michael Penix. People who've been watching or listening for a while know that I am a pro Michael Penix. I'm a Michael Penix guy. I don't really even love, although the comp you hear a lot for him from people I know, I've heard this a few times around college football this year, was a taller Tua Tagovailoa, partly because he's left-handed. He had a really good combine. He just throws the ball really well. I saw somebody wrote that he was, for the receivers, one of his favorite guys to receivers said he threw the most catchable ball or one of the best balls to catch, as Bo Nix did not. But yeah, he's a real deal quarterback. Michael Penix, the concerns with him, history of injuries, although he's been healthy this year. But when he got into games, he got beat up. He got cracked several times in big games. Had for the most part good protection. Had elite receivers. It wasn't just Rome Odunze. It was Jalen McMillan and Jalen Polk. Had so he had a lot of time to throw. Mostly, his arm, his motion. People don't love his motion in the NFL. They think that he doesn't use his lower body properly in step, and that he's all upper body. But I don't know. I just see a guy that makes plays. Now he's not a top 15 pick. One of the things somebody wrote today, maybe it was Graziano, maybe it was a CBS Sports article, that people are going to be surprised with how high JJ McCarthy gets drafted. As an example, feels like the NFL's higher on JJ McCarthy than the media, the fans. Troy Franklin is a guy that I heard that the media and fans are higher on than the NFL. So when Troy Franklin falls after a poor combine, he's not falling on NFL boards. He's falling on media mock drafts and fan conversations. But that, for the NFL, one question I would say this for anybody that's going to go watch some Troy Franklin tape, try to find tape of him against man coverage. Because a lot of the highlight videos of Troy Franklin on YouTube are him just running wide ass open against zones. And some of his highlights, I'm not knocking Troy, but some of his best highlights are he had this big play against SC. I had one defensive coach in the league tell me this year that they don't they'll watch other defenses for tape, to study, what are they doing? Oh, maybe we can take something from them. Maybe we can take something from them. That they didn't watch SC because they couldn't figure out what SC was doing on defense this year. So, I go back. If you were a Troy Franklin guy, go back and watch some of that stuff with a more critical eye, maybe. Watch it a second time. And, I think try to imagine, can that happen in the NFL? He's still going. This is why I say, this is going to be a bonanza in the second round and the third round because there's so many of these receivers that you're going to have mocked kind of in some mocks end of the first round, and all of a sudden they're going to be in the second round. So, Penix as a Niner is not a real conversation, but Penix is a really interesting prospect on a good team is a really interesting conversation. To me, Penix I hadn't really thought of this, but just off the top of my head, if you said top 5 most interesting draft stories, Penix is in that conversation. All these offensive linemen delivered, right? This projection, there was going to be 7 tackles maybe going in the top 20. After the combine, they're trending. Watching the offensive linemen yesterday, these guys it's crazy how well they move. And not all of them worked out. They still have some, pro days and that type of thing. So, that thing, it feels like it's trending after the combine. If you trended the pre-combine hype on how many quarterbacks and how many offensive tackles would get drafted in the first round, feels like it's still trending that way, right? With the potential of having basically 12 quarterbacks, maybe 13 quarterbacks and offensive tackles go. So, well over a third of your first round could be quarterbacks and offensive tackles. not counting guaranteed 3 receivers, but which means if we're guaranteed 3 receivers, we're probably getting 5. So all that stuff is still trending. I like Penix a ton. Says Spencer. I think he's undervalued. Like Purdy better though. Better to draft capital. And yeah, I mean, I'm happy to have conversations. People, I love when people are like, I've seen these comments sometimes like, that's a stupid conversation. Why don't we just wait? I'm not the Penix for the Niners one is like beyond a real conversation, but like, that's a stupid conversation. Why don't we just wait and find out? Like, you know what? Yeah, cool. Let me shut down the YouTube channel and the pod, and we're just not going to do anything until we know what happened. That's how people on bar stools talk, right? Like, I don't know, Jim. We don't have all the information yet. I'd rather not speculate on this very important topic on whether or not the 49ers are going to extend Brandon Aiyuk, trade him, or make him play on his 5th-year option. So why don't we all just take a breath, sit here in silence, and drink our Coors Lights? Once a month, somebody makes that comment. I'm like, what are you talking about? What are you doing? What are you doing here? What are you doing here? What do you? Yeah, you're right. We should just talk about more important things. I never understand that perspective. Comment from Calvin. The COVID year draft was a big asterisk. Even Lawrence is on a downward trajectory. Yeah, I mean, if you talk to like college coaches, like college basketball coaches, one of the big things, the portal opens up. That COVID year, you couldn't evaluate. You couldn't get players on campus. You couldn't talk to them. So you're just like kind of blindly grabbing guys. And there are a lot of coaches with hindsight that say, God, we had so many bad personality fits. Now, Trey Lance was not a bad personality fit. Trevor Lawrence is, he's going to be their quarterback for a while. But yeah, I mean, that draft, especially from the quarterback position, is looking well, what we already knew it was. Trevor Lawrence is interesting. I didn't mean to keep my face up here on the screen all this time. Trevor Lawrence is going to be another interesting story this year. Michael says Washington was better than SC, but Caleb is more in demand. Niners don't want Penix. Yeah. Caleb. I mean, Caleb has an athleticism and a physicality to him, even though he's not. I don't know if it was clear watching him on NFL Network, but as someone who's stood by multiple, he's not a massive. He's not 6'3", 6'4", but he is a force when it comes to playing the position. Now, the one thing that I think you're going to hear a lot for the next month plus is just, can he play on time? Was it the offense? Was it him? Why were they always just trying to make superhuman plays? And why wasn't it on time? But I don't think there's any debate about who you draft first this year. Michael says, is Staley going to take Shanahan's job? Yes. Yeah, he's going to take Shanahan's job of being the auditor of defensive coach meetings. AJ says, am I a homer for wanting Brendan Rice? LOL. He looks sick. No, you are not a homer for wanting Brendan Rice. My take on Brendan Rice is that if his name was anything different, he would still be every bit the prospect that he is. The fact that Jerry Rice is his father, I don't think has inflated his stock at all. I think if anything, in a weird way, over the course of his career, it's not affecting its draft stock, but I think people were a little bit slower to identify Brendan Rice, especially early at Colorado. Like when he was at Colorado, and I remember doing Colorado games then, there was very minimal, oh, this is Jerry Rice's kid type buzz. There was none of that. I mean, you would say every game, it was to the point I remember, like we would do a broadcast. I remember doing a game his first year at Colorado that he played and saying, this is Jerry Rice's son. And what that represents to me is like, you had to tell people this is Jerry Rice's son. Everybody did not know that Jerry Rice's son was playing for Colorado and his name was Brendan Rice. It was just not, he was not a major, high, like top level, top tier prospect. Colorado was not great. There was just not a lot of that buzz. By the time he got to SC, I think a lot of people knew, but even then, I think your casual college football fan, I think your casual college football fan would be like, is that guy? That's that's Jerry Rice's kid. So I don't think the fact that he's Jerry Rice's kid has inflated his stock at all, either with the NFL, with the media, with the public, with Niners fans specifically, maybe with Niners fans a little. But I see a guy who almost has had to go above and beyond to prove that he's not an inflated prospect. Part of it, too, is if he were, he's not the top tier prospect in this draft. He's not even like the tier 2-ish guy. And, I don't like Marvin Harrison Jr. I don't really think has been inflated, but his name is Marvin Harrison Jr. There is a Jerry Rice Jr., but that's his brother. This is Brendan Rice. And, I don't think if you like Brendan Rice, if you think Brendan Rice can play, to me, that's a legitimate, that's just legit. He's a good player. If they drafted him, I think the excitement would be more about the fact that he got drafted and that you took a good prospect than that you took Jerry Rice's kid. And I don't want to beat a dead horse because I've said this many times, but I think he's also the kind of guy that will be unaffected by, if he were to be a 49er, by all the extra stuff that comes with it. And it would be a lot extra. I mean, Jerry's around. Jerry was at the combine wearing a 7-Eleven chain, always open. So Sam says, if we go tackle at 32, it should be a good one. Yeah. But the question is, if you go tackle at 32, are you reaching into the second round for a tackle, or did somebody fall? Because, did I say 32? 31. 31. Niners didn't win the Super Bowl. Unless you turn it off at a certain point. Like, got the 32nd pick. Marcus says Aziz wants to come back to the Niners. Definitely feels that way based on some of his social media activity. Cisco Kid, this is related to Chase Young. If he signs a one-year deal here, he should have better stats, help him get paid top dollar in the future, rather than signing a one-year deal with a weak line and then not getting what he's looking for the following year. I do think Chase Young should be incentivized if it's going to be. It's a good point. If it's going to be a one-year deal somewhere, I think should be incentivized to take that one-year deal here. I agree with that. Body more similar to T.O. than Jerry as well. Didn't realize he was so yoked. I mean, T.O.'s bigger, but he doesn't look. That's part of it. He does not look like, physically, he doesn't look like Jerry. I was unfazed by his. I don't need to know a single thing about how he timed. I think he's just a player. Matthew says the combined weight of our first 4 picks better be more than 1,100 pounds, or the draft is a bust. All right, hold on. Let's do some math. 1,100 divided by 4 is 275. So you want to say 1,100. We're going to go minus 325. That's 775 pounds. I'll go 325 again. That's 450. Okay. So you want 2 offensive linemen. And 450 divided by 2 is 225. So what else do you want? A tight end? You want a big tight end? You want the kid out of Texas? All right. But he weighs is he like 245? I can't find. I think he's 245. Hold on. Efforting. Where's the weights? I've noticed some rosters do not put weights. Jatavian Sanders, 243. Okay, so I was close. And then you can take a receiver. Some of these, I see it in basketball now. They've started to not put player weights, even for men's players, on their like team websites. As a, I think a lot of people deal with eating disorders. I think that's why. I think that's why. Michael says, actually, Rice 2.0 was more like Ruggs, just not as much speed. No, that's not a good comp. I mean, Ruggs was speed, so not as much speed was just not Ruggs, and he's bigger. He's a different player. First Ruggs comp of the 2024 pre-draft work, though. T.O. was 6'3", 220. Brendan 6'3", 215. They play different, though. What were their arm lengths? Terrell had really long arms. So I'm not going to Google that now, but that would be my guess. Maybe I'm right. If you tell me they got the same length arms, too, now let's have a conversation. Their physicality, T.O. played about as angry, but tell me about their arms. Then we can get back to that. Comment from Niner Bang. Will BA take less than $23 million a year? He doesn't have to, because if you're him, you can make 14 this year, be a free agent next year. You got a pretty good idea that the Niners won't tag you, and then we'll be a year into a cycle where some of these guys are making, if the Amon-Ra St. Brown number is 26, 27, I don't think there's much incentive for Aiyuk to take 21 or 22. Take 20, let's say 22. Take 22 and Amon-Ra St. Brown signs for 27. And you had 14 coming this year. And if you waited till next year, you're going to be asking for 28, 29. I know when we do these, like, we really project the biggest numbers. We project huge numbers on these guys. But I'd be surprised. If Amon-Ra signs for 26 and Aiyuk signs an extension $21 million. Doesn't feel like it's trending towards him doing that, because he's a premium. If he had free, he would be in a league with premium receivers, even if he's not a tier 1 guy, which he's not. Tier 1 being like the true Tyreek Hill, right? But he's also not a tier 3. He's like on his own. We've talked about this. He's kind of like on his own little tier. He would have so many options. All right, here we go. Thanks to the research department. Brendan Rice, 32 and 5/8 arms. T.O., 34.5. That's not insignificant, a difference there, okay? That's a significant difference. Both 6'3", 209, draft weight. Oh, Brendan's draft weight 209, T.O.'s 213. Okay. I wouldn't put T.O. on him, but we're talking. I just don't think there's any reason for I think a good player. It doesn't have to be T.O. If you knew it'd be T.O., he'd go in the first round, but he's not gonna. So Zeus Gucci says, what round do you see Brendan Rice going? I see him at the beginning, maybe the end of the maybe the very end of the second round, early third. If I had to guess right now, I'd say early third round. But you never know with the receiver inflation. These receivers start popping off, and they start popping off, and you never know what's going to happen. What number would Brendan wear if he were a 49er? Is 2 available? 2? Who's wearing 2? Anybody wearing 2? Diablo, Illinois is wearing 2. Can't wear 2. It's not college. Yeah, I know what number you wouldn't wear. $79. Yep, he'd wear 79. One better than 80. Not a lot. Boy, he can really block, but not that well. All right. That's all for this Monday morning. Thanks for jumping in today, everybody. Appreciate the likes, the reviews, the comments. Somebody asked, how many times can you do an Apple podcast comment? I think you can I don't know the answer to that. It might be that you can just update a comment. I saw somebody recently do that because I checked the reviews. Sorry, not comments, the reviews. I think you can update a review. So if you want to do that, feel free. Appreciate that very much. And we'll have more to talk about this week. So thanks for popping in, y'all. Talk to you later. Bye.